Good afternoon. I'm Julian Butch Haley Jr., Chairman of the Alexandria African American Hall of Fame, and your co-host for this historic occasion today. On behalf of the City of Alexandria, the Alexandria African American Hall of Fame, and our founder and project director, Mr. Robert Dawkins, we would like to welcome you to the unveiling of the Earl Francis Lloyd statue, one of Alexandria's own. Due to COVID-19 protocols, this ceremony is being seen and conducted virtually for the safety and well-being for everyone. Earl once said during his Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame speech that you couldn't come from Alexandria, Virginia, all the way to Springfield, Massachusetts, without having hands on you. Well, I'm going to tell you today, we're going to see and hear from people who he laid his hands on. At this time, we'd like to have the invocation conducted by the Reverend Professor Quadricos Bernard Driscoll, pastor of the historic Beulah Baptist Church here in Alexandria, Virginia.
Greetings, friends. I am Quadricos Bernard Driscoll, the senior pastor of the Beulah Baptist Church here in Alexandria, Virginia, where we have stood for nearly 158 years. Friends, it is an honor and a pleasure to be with you today as we celebrate the life and the legacy of Earl Francis Lloyd. Now let us go to the throne of grace by the God of the universe. Eternal and gracious God, you are one whom we give thanks. We thank you, God, for life. We thank you, God, for memory. And we thank you, God, for legacy. We thank you, God, that you know, as do we, that all lives matter, most especially Black lives in a society that has continuously denigrated our lives. And so we pause right now to simply say thank you. We thank you for the life and the legacy of Earl Francis Lloyd. We thank you for what he stood for. And we thank you for what this statue in our great city, his native city, will now stand for. And we ask you that this statue be an inspiration to all who walk past, most especially the most vulnerable and precious of our society, our children. We thank you and we give you praise right now and today. We say, Amen.
He attended Parker Gray High School and was an all-Met basketball player. He coached both boys and women's basketball for 50 years at all levels, high school, college, pros, and USA national teams. I present Mr. Jimmy Lewis.
Thanks, Butch. And we want to again welcome everyone here and all those who are viewing this amazingly historic program today. April 3rd, a day on which Earl Francis Lloyd would have turned 93 years old, and an occasion where we celebrate his life and legacy with this statue of him. We share in the joy of helping to celebrate a true hero of Alexandria and the world. This vision of the Alexandria African American Hall of Fame is a true labor of love and will forever provide an educational and inspirational example for generations to come. So to the Lloyd family, the city of Alexandria, and yes, to Earl's adopted home of Detroit, Michigan, we say the greeting of one of Motown's finest. Get ready, because here we come with the Moon Fixer, the Big Cat, the Earl Lloyd story in bronze.
And now we'll have remarks from the mayor from the city of Alexandria, the Honorable Justin Wilson.
Hello, I'm Justin Wilson, Mayor of the City of Alexandria, Virginia, and it is my privilege to be a part of this commemoration of the legacy of Earl Lloyd. Earl Lloyd was a native son of the City of Alexandria, someone who only 3 years after Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in baseball, Earl Lloyd broke the color barrier in the National Basketball Association, stepping onto an NBA court in 1950. In 1968, he broke the color barrier as the first assistant coach in the NBA who was African American. And we are so proud to claim him as a son of Alexandria. At this point, I do want to read a proclamation commemorating Earl Francis Lloyd. Whereas Earl Francis Lloyd, a son of Alexandria, who went on to become an international hero, was born on this day, April 3rd, 1928, raised in the Burg and at 1020 Montgomery Street as the youngest of 3 sons to Theodore Benjamin Lloyd and Daisy Mitchell Lloyd. And whereas Earl graduated from Parker Gray High School in 1946 before going to West Virginia State College, where he led its 1948 basketball team to an undefeated season and was named a Black College All-American. And whereas in 1950, Earl was drafted by the Washington Capitals of the NBA, and on October 31st, 1950, he became the first African American to play in an NBA game. Later that year, Earl was drafted into the military. And whereas in 1955, Earl and his teammate Jim Tucker helped lead the Syracuse Nationals to the NBA championship and became the first African Americans to accomplish this feat. Later in 1971, Earl broke another color barrier when he was named the first NBA African American bench coach with the Detroit Pistons. Whereas Earl was inducted into 7 Halls of Fame, including the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame in 2003 and the Alexandria African American Hall of Fame in 2013, where his concluding remarks, he paid homage to the Parker Gray High School and Alexandria upbringing when he said, quote, "You don't come from Alexandria, Virginia to Springfield, Massachusetts without some hands on you." And whereas on February 25th, 2015, Earl Francis Lloyd died at his home in Crossville, Tennessee. He is survived by his wife, Charlita, sons Kevin, Kenneth, and David, grandchildren, and extended family. And whereas today the City of Alexandria memorializes the life and many contributions of Earl Lloyd as we unveil this 8-foot sculpture initiated by Brian Poore, the head men's basketball coach at West Virginia State University, and crafted by Brian Hanlon, the sculptor for the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame, and donated by the Lloyd family to the Alexandria African American Hall of Fame. And now, therefore, I, Justin M. Wilson, Mayor of the City of Alexandria, Virginia, and on behalf of the Alexandria City Council and with the Alexandria African American Hall of Fame, do hereby on April 3rd, 2021, enshrine and emplace this bronze sculpture of Earl Francis Lloyd in the Alexandria African American Hall of Fame in the City of Alexandria. And I call this observance to the attention of all of our citizens. And in doing so, it is hoped that all who enter this site are moved by the life of Earl Lloyd, his example, champion spirit, and grace. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the City of Alexandria to be affixed this 3rd day of April, 2021. Thank you very much for joining us. At this point, I'd like to welcome the Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Ralph Northam.
Hello, I'm Virginia Governor Ralph Northam. While I could not be with you in person today, I am honored to be a virtual part of this celebration to pay tribute to the life and legacy of Earl Francis Lloyd. At 6 foot 5 inches, Earl was a perfect fit for a basketball career, and his accomplishments on the court are impressive. An undefeated season at West Virginia State University, a Black College All-American, and eventual induction into not 1, but 7 Halls of Fame. But he was also a groundbreaker, helping to desegregate the sport of basketball. Earl became the first African American to play in an NBA game, the first African American to lead the Syracuse Nationals to the NBA championship, and the first NBA African American bench coach with the Detroit Pistons. He was also a military veteran, serving in the United States Army in Korea, and was a husband, father, and grandfather. And he was also a son of Virginia, born and raised in Alexandria. That's why it's fitting to erect this statue in his honor in the Alexandria African American Hall of Fame. Future generations will be able to see it and learn how a Virginian led the way, busting through the old, ugly rules of discrimination and segregation and opening doors for the thousands of talented athletes who came after him.
At this point, I'd like to introduce the senior senator from the Commonwealth of Virginia and Alexandria resident, Senator Mark Warner.
Hi, I'm Virginia Senator Mark Warner. And more important for this presentation, I am an Alexandria resident and an aging basketball player. So I really want to compliment the Alexandria African American Hall of Fame and the city of Alexandria for putting this event together. Earl was the first African American player to go into the NBA. He was selected by the then called Washington Capitals back in 1950. And while I was a big fan of the NBA growing up and followed so many stars in the early 60s, I wasn't fully aware of Earl's contribution to breaking the color barrier way back in 1950 until this effort brought his name and his story to my attention. I think it is terribly important that we honor those African Americans who contribute to sports, oftentimes having to overcome prejudice and abuse to try to integrate our professional sports leagues. So to Earl Lloyd, an Alexandrian, a great basketball player, a trailblazer, I salute your legacy. To the African American Hall of Fame, Sports Hall of Fame in Alexandria, I salute your efforts, and to the city, thank you for helping put together these efforts where we celebrate great African Americans, great Alexandrians, and their contributions to a better Commonwealth and to a better country.
Origin of the statue. Head coach from Earl Lloyd College alma mater, West Virginia State University, Coach Brian Poore.
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Poore, and I'm the head basketball coach at West Virginia State University. I'd like to first thank the city of Alexandria, Robert Dawkins, and Butch Haley for inviting me to say a few words about my dear friend, Earl Francis Lloyd. I was hired in the spring of 1999 to be the head basketball coach here at West Virginia State University, the alma mater of Mr. Lloyd. They asked me to say a few words about Mr. Lloyd and how the statue actually came to be that is here on our campus in our new Walker Convocation Center. But before I get to that story, I need to give a little bit of background information. As I said, in 1999, I was hired to be the basketball coach here. In the spring, January of 2004, we brought Mr. Lloyd back to retire his jersey. It was over that weekend of events that I got to know Mr. Lloyd on a personal level. He and I became very close friends, someone who I enjoyed immensely talking to. He was always positive, humble, caring, and did anything I ever asked him to do with our program. So he and I became, like I said, very close friends. In 2010, I was fortunate enough to be inducted into the West Virginia State University Hall of Fame here on our campus. That morning, it's a Saturday morning brunch that our Hall of Fame committee puts together for the inductees. That morning, I'm coming into the building, turn the corner, and who do I see but Mr. Lloyd standing there. He didn't tell me he was coming. Nobody really knew he was coming, but that's the way Earl was. And I said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "You didn't think I was going to miss this, did you?" And so that's the kind of person that he was. He always cared about the other guy. And so it meant a lot to me that he showed up for my Hall of Fame induction. Now on to the statue a little bit here. In 2012, the Final Four was in New Orleans. The Final Four is also what is called the National Association of Basketball Coaches Convention, the NABC convention. So at the convention, all college coaches and high school coaches and even international coaches gather for, clinics and display of new uniforms and practice gear and shoes. And so it's a whole weekend affair. I had went to several Final Fours, but in the recent years, I had stopped going. We had a couple young kids. My wife and Jennifer and I had a couple young kids. I wasn't really trying to move and get another job, so I was pretty happy at West Virginia State University, so I had stopped attending the Final Fours. However, that year it was in New Orleans. And my wife says, I've never been to New Orleans. Why don't we go to the Final Four this year so I can visit New Orleans? So we packed up and we go down for the Final Four in New Orleans. First thing I do, whenever you get there, you go over and you check in at the convention center and you get your credentials. And then you actually can go into the expo. And so the expo that year was, I believe, in the Muriel Convention Center in New Orleans. Walk in, and across the way is a huge statue of Shaq. And Shaq was hanging on the rim and dunking. And I'm like, I knew at that point we already had procured the funds for a new gym convocation center here on our campus. And I wanted to honor, Earl Lloyd with a statue. So I beeline it, go straight across the convention center. And I'm like a kid in a candy store looking up at this statue of Shaq Duncan. And this Caucasian man, about my age, maybe slightly older, walks up to me and says, "Hey, how you doing?" I said, "I'm doing great." I said, "How much would one of those cost?" And he says, "Who do you want one of?" And I said, "Earl Lloyd." And he quickly turned his head and looked at me like he knew who Earl Lloyd was, which kind of shocked me because so many people don't know his legacy and his story. And so he said, "Do you mean the Earl Lloyd?" And I said, "Yes, the Earl Lloyd who graduated from West Virginia State University and was the first African-American player to ever play in an NBA game. He graduated from my university. We're getting a new gym, new building. I want to have one of these statues in our lobby." And he said, "It's a done deal. It's a done deal. I'm going to do it." And I said, "Well, how much is it going to cost?" And he says, "We'll figure that out later." The man's name was Brian Hanlon, who's also the official sculptor of the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. We continued to converse a little bit. He gave me his business card, and he said, "I'll definitely be in touch." So we continued to talk about it. We picked out what picture we wanted to do of it. And then it comes time to fund it. And Brian says, "First off, I'm not charging you anything for his work, his artistic work." And if you go back to Brian Hanlon was a track guy, didn't play basketball. But the year that Earl Lloyd was inducted into the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame was the first year that Brian went to the Final Four as the sculptor for the Hall of Fame. So as Earl does for everybody, Brian knows nobody in the basketball world, but Earl took him under his wing, introduced him to everybody, sat with him at the dinner, sat with him at the game, and did what Earl always did. He befriended Brian, made him feel special, and Brian felt like he owed that to Mr. Lloyd. So we go through the process, and we've got the clay model, and it's all ready to go. He sent me pictures of it. It's good to go. He has me come up to the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame induction when a guy by the name of Manny Jackson was going to be there. And so Brian and Manny and I are sitting down for breakfast in the Holiday Inn right across the street from the Hall of Fame. And we pitch how much we need. We needed roughly, I think it was $50,000 for the bronzing of the statue. And Manny graciously donated that money so that we could get the statue bronzed. Now the fun part of the story comes with the building is being erected. It's going along okay. In January, they're telling us by the end of January, we'll be in the building. Bad weather hits, so now they're saying the 1st of February. Then they're saying, well, it's probably going to be the 2nd week of February, maybe the 3rd week of February. So our president at the time was Dr. Brian Hemphill, and I talked to Dr. Hemphill and I said, you know what, we should just postpone opening up the building until next fall, the beginning of basketball season. We can invite a local junior high team over, make sure that we win the first game in the new building, and then we can unveil the statue and do it then. And Dr. Hemphill says, no, sir, That's not what we're doing. We're going to open it up with the last game of the regular season against our crosstown rivals, University of Charleston, and I'll put everything together. You just worry about winning the game. And so thankfully, Dr. Hemphill did that for us because Earl was able to be here, and that was on February the 28th, 2014, is when we actually unveiled the statue and had the dedication of the Walker Convocation Center. Mr. Lloyd was here to see it, along with several NBA dignitaries, Oscar Robertson, Bill Russell, NBA TV was here, Olin Chamberlain was here, obviously Earl's sons and wife was here as well, and it was a fantastic night that we got to honor Earl. And the crazy part of it is that next October is when Mr. Lloyd went into the hospital and didn't come out of the hospital. So had we waited like I wanted to and unveil it the next year, Earl would not have seen his statue. So thanks to Dr. Hemphill for pushing us to do it the last game of the regular season. And honestly, I owe it all to my wife, because if she didn't want to go to New Orleans for the Final Four, I'd have never met Brian Hanlon. We might not even have a statue in the Walker Convocation Center. So as all good stories are told, there's usually a female behind it who puts everything in the right place. So thanks to my wife, Jennifer. Thanks to Brian Hanlon for his beautiful work. And thanks for Earl Lloyd, just being Earl Lloyd. I love you and I miss you.
I would like to introduce former NFL player and head coach of the Tampa Bay Bucks and Indianapolis Colts, who became the first African-American head coach to win the Super Bowl. We welcome award-winning TV NFL analyst, Tony Dungy.
Hi, I'm Tony Dungy, and I want to send my congratulations to the City of Alexandria and to the Lloyd family as you honor Earl Lloyd on this special day, erecting a statue for him in the Alexandria African American Hall of Fame. It is so fitting because Earl was not only a great athlete, but he was a pioneer and a trailblazer. He had an impact on so many lives, including mine. I grew up as a young boy in Detroit, Michigan area when Earl became head coach of the Pistons. It was a landmark occasion, and it had an impact on a lot of people. It told me that as a young athlete, I could strive not only to be a player, but someday to be a coach. And as I sat there in Super Bowl 41, representing African-American coaches as the first to win a Super Bowl, I think back and thought back at that time to Earl Lloyd and what he did to blaze the trail for us. So congratulations, this is well-deserved, and I'm just ecstatic and hope that it's a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you so much.
We will now hear from the immediate family members of Earl Lloyd, his sons, David, who will be representing his mother, Charlita, followed by Kevin, Kenny, and his nephew, Reggie.
Hello, my name is David, and I'm Earl Lloyd's youngest son. And on behalf of my mother, Charlita Lloyd, and the entire Lloyd family, we would like to thank the Alexandria African American Hall of Fame for this amazing opportunity to display the statue designed by Mr. Brian Hanlon. You'll see a picture behind me of my parents, and this was the last time they were in Alexandria. And my dad was so thrilled about being there. So having this incredible statue forever placed in Alexandria will just warm his heart. So my mom is just thrilled to death. With her being a former educator, she really is appreciative of this statue and understands the value of it being placed in Alexandria, and in hopes of kids coming up 50, 60 years from now and stumbling upon the statue and learning about Earl and his pioneering with the NBA, his being not only being the first Black to play, but his coaching career, his life after basketball, the way he gave back and stood up for his community. He was just such a role model in the city of Detroit and around the world. So we are just very excited about that statue being there and the learning opportunities that it's going to bring.
When my father was coaching the Detroit Pistons in 71 or 72, I must have been 11, 12 years old. And it'd be just a great thing to be, 11 years old and you see your father out there coaching the Detroit Pistons. And you look at your father and you're telling yourself, that's your dad, and he's coaching the Detroit Pistons, a professional NBA team. I think this is a very, very incredible thing for the kids of Alexandria, Virginia, and the kids in the surrounding areas to see a statue of my father, Earl Lloyd, who was the first African-American to play in the NBA to have a statue in the rec center. Thank you to the Alexandria African-American Hall of Fame. Thank you very much for everything that you put into this, getting the ball rolling and making everything happen, getting the statue of my father in your facility.
Hello, everybody. I'm Kenneth Earl Lloyd, and I'm the eldest son of Earl Lloyd. And I just want to take a moment, first of all, to share on behalf of my family. My wife, Shantae Lloyd, my eldest daughter, Sierra Lloyd, my oldest son, Alexander Earl Lloyd, and my youngest son, Miles Earl Lloyd. I'd like to really, on their behalves, we'd like to say that we're very honored that you all have taken this time and this moment to honor my father by erecting a statue of him in his hometown. It means a lot. Also, I want to thank the Alexandria African American Hall of Fame and the city of Alexandria. I mean, I think it means a lot to be honored in the city that you were raised in, have some of your friends and in your family to be a part of that. He held from whence he came deep in his heart. My father was a guy who could have been anything that he wanted, but what he was through and through a hometown boy. I mean, he loved his hometown. He frequently came back, man, and did things to enrich the youth of his city in which he was born, in which he was raised. So I, again, would like to say thank you very much. Words can't express how honored we really feel for this, and we're looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Reginald Lloyd. Shout out to all the family, special shout out to the Alexandria African American Hall of Fame for all the great work, in having this day come to fruition. The importance of having this statue will play an important part in our history for years to come, especially for our young folks, which will, ultimately give them a sense of pride and dignity, knowing that there's a greatness instilled in each and every one of them, and that they too can accomplish great things also. Thanks for watching, and stay blessed, family.
This gentleman attended West Virginia State College and was a teammate of Earl Lloyd's from 1946 to 1950. Their 1947-48 team went undefeated and was declared Black College champions. I present Dr. Frank Enty.
Earl and I arrived at West Virginia State College in 1946. We were both recruited by Coach Mark Cardwell. We were the only undefeated college team in the United States, and which was a hallmark. All in all, it was quite an experience, and one, obviously, which I shall never forget. The recognition ceremony for the statue really represents an achievement on the part of Earl, and it really is. It means more than just a statue. It's an accomplishment. It shows that someone coming from humble beginnings, Alexandria, in a segregated school, is able to rise and become a notable figure in the history of athletics. So this simply means that any youngster who has the ambition and the determination and the stick-to-itiveness can also rise to great heights. That's what the statue really represents.
This next gentleman was one of Earl's mentees, and he had the honor of producing Till Victory Is Won documentary. I present Mr. O.J. Mcgee.
Hello, I'm OJ Mcgee, and I had the pleasure of being introduced to Mr. Earl Lloyd back in the 1990s by his West Virginia State College basketball teammate, Mr. Frank Enty. And back then, I had heard about this tremendous undefeated basketball team, and I had an idea to do a documentary on the team. I live in North Carolina now, but I was born and raised in the nation's capital, which is just a stone throw away from Mr. Lloyd's hometown of Alexandria, Virginia. And so I am so glad to see that there's a statue being unveiled in his likeness and in his honor, particularly in his hometown, so that the youth, our youth, can see the shoulders in which they stand. And so today, I just want to take an opportunity to thank you, Mr. Lloyd, for your greatness and most of all, your sacrifice. Today, we honor and we salute you.
Our next guest is a former NBA head coach, player, and assistant coach to Earl Lloyd with the Detroit Pistons. Here is Ray Scott.
This is Ray Scott, and I'd like to offer my sentiments about our beloved Earl Francis Lloyd. He was one of the greatest people I've ever known in my life, not only as a basketball player, but as a man, as a husband, as a father, as a mentor, as a brother. He just put so much into my life. He brought me to Detroit in 1961, and I'm still here, and I like for him to know I'm still here. But the big thing is the dedication that you're having for him. I don't think there can be enough dedications. He's like Hank Aaron to me. You just can't do enough. He should be even signing baseballs. He was such a great man. But on the dedication of what you're going to put together for him in this celebration, I offer my deepest, warmest thoughts. I think of him often. I think that having a statue, having a street in the town that you grew up in Alexandria, is just the greatest thing that anyone could ever have, because that means that their memory not only lives forever, but it's seen forever. And so, Francis Earl Lloyd, I'm so happy that this award and these gifts are still here for you. And I know you're happy and laughing to know that we're still thinking about you. And I talk to my boy, Kevin Lloyd, all the time. So everything is good. Just know that we love you and that you're in our thoughts. God bless, my friend.
Former great basketball player and legendary CBS NFL star host, ladies and gentlemen, JB James Brown.
Hello, I'm James Brown, and certainly there is so much to cheer about the phenomenal success of Mr. Earl Lloyd, the many firsts that are synonymous with his name. The first African-American to play in an NBA game back in 1950, the first African-American player to win an NBA championship, the first to be named an assistant coach, and the first to be named a bench coach or a head coach. And he is in the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame, and he's been recognized with so many other awards. Clearly, he was a trailblazer in the truest sense of the word. And it is proper for us to celebrate him, not only for the door that he opened for the legions who would follow him, but indeed for his example, not just in the NBA, but also in the most important game, and that is in the game of life. And I honor not just Earl Lloyd, but his mother, who inspired him with the strength, resolve, and confidence to deal effectively with the challenges and the people who were not cheering him on in overcoming barriers, those who did not embrace him. Her encouragement when he was the only African American in the NBA is just as relevant for today. She memorably asked Earl Lloyd, quote, "Are people still calling you demeaning names?" And he said, "Yes, ma'am." And she said, "Well, make them be quiet." And again, he said, "Yes, ma'am." And he did just that. And you know, I don't think Earl's mom would want us to be quiet today as we rejoice about the perseverance her son modeled, the barrier breaker that he indeed was, and the excellence that characterized all that he did. Indeed, Mr. Earl Francis Lloyd made his mom and all of us very, very proud.
We are honored to have with us today the Commissioner of the National Basketball Association, Mr. Adam Silver.
Hello, everyone. I'm Adam Silver, Commissioner of the NBA. Thanks to Mayor Wilson and the Alexandria African American Hall of Fame for inviting me to be part of this special day honoring the great Earl Lloyd. Earl was a true pioneer and the first Black player to play in an NBA game. More than 70 years after his debut, Earl's impact is still felt around the league. I got to know Earl over the years, and he was always gracious and optimistic. He knew that he was part of something bigger than himself. Today, we celebrate Earl and the statue that will honor his legacy forever. Thank you again for allowing me to be part of this terrific ceremony.
Earl served as a mentor to this Naismith Basketball Hall of Famer and longtime advisor of the Philadelphia 76ers, Mr. Sonny Hill.
Hi, I'm Sonny Hill, and they have asked me to say something in reference to the fact that Mr. Earl Lloyd is going to be going into the Alexandria, Virginia Black Hall of Fame. Richly deserved. Along with that, they're also going to have a statue, richly deserved, in reference to Mr. Earl Lloyd. But let me tell you a little something about myself in reference to why I'm given the opportunity to speak. I'm a member of the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. I'm also the executive advisor to the Philadelphia 76ers. I've been in broadcasting for 52 years, and I'm 84 years old. I'm saying all that to you so that you get a better understanding of my background and the longevity of my background. I had the privilege and pleasure of meeting Mr. Earl Lloyd in the mid-50s, around 1956. He was still playing for the Syracuse Nationals NBA basketball team, along with another pioneer Black by the name of Mr. Jim Tucker. Both of them not only allowed me to be a part of their lives, but they also reached out to me and embraced me. And I feel good about the fact that a pioneer like Mr. Earl Lloyd, who became not only my hero, my mentor, but also a father figure, and the privilege to be able to be on the journey with him and allowing him to inform me about the journey that he has been on. It's always great for us to recognize the groundbreakers, the ones who opened the door. When you think about Mr. Lloyd, you're not thinking about a Black hero. You're also thinking about an American hero because of what he did, not only from the point of sport, basketball, but Mr. Lloyd was also an educator. And he recognized that if you use that, it will help you to move forward in the society that we live in. So I'm so honored that the Alexandria Hall of Fame would even ask me to say a few words in reference to having Mr. Earl Lloyd inducted into the Black Hall of Fame, along with having a statue for him, which will be there in perpetuity so people can understand that he was a trailblazer, he was ahead of his time, and he set the tone and the foundation for others to follow in his footsteps. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to say a few words on behalf of my hero, my mentor, my father figure, Mr. Earl Lloyd.
We are thrilled to welcome the Chairman and CEO of the Washington Wizards and Mystics, Mr. Ted Leonsis.
Hi, everyone. My name's Ted Leonsis, and on behalf of the Washington Wizards and Mystics and all of Monumental Sports and Entertainment, I wanted to thank Charlita Lloyd and the entire Lloyd family for allowing us to share in today's celebration on the great legacy of Earl Lloyd. The DMV is the capital of basketball, and Earl Lloyd is certainly our pioneer and our leader. Drafted by our very own Washington Capitals with an O, Earl's legacy goes much deeper than his success as a player on the court or in coaching on the sidelines. In becoming the first African American to play in the NBA, Earl's perseverance paved the way for countless young African American men and women from the DMV and across the country who were seeing for the first time that they too could play professionally. As we all know, the DMV has been home to many a great NBA and WNBA star, and Earl made that all possible. The statue unveiled today will not only stand to celebrate Earl's many accomplishments, but it will ensure all of his life lessons will never be forgotten. Countless young aspiring athletes who will visit the African American Hall of Fame here in Alexandria, Virginia, and be reminded of what they too can accomplish. I'm sure some of them will even follow in his footsteps to the NBA and the WNBA. Again, thank you for allowing the Wizards to participate in today's celebration of the great Earl Lloyd. I look forward to visiting the statue in person soon. Thank you again, Lloyd family.
At this time, we want to pause and have a moment to honor one of Earl's greatest contemporary NBA legends, Elgin Baylor. His recent passing at the age of 86 reminds us again of the tremendous talent which the Washington, D.C. area has produced in basketball. The product of Spingarn High School in Washington, D.C. was truly a superstar and displayed the creativity and grace which helped to produce the modern NBA style of play of Dr. J, Jordan, and Kobe. Our thoughts are with the Hall of Famer, AKA Rabbit. Finally, we are excited to hear from one of Earl's closest friends and former player with the Detroit Pistons. Here is fellow Naismith Basketball Hall of Famer and one of the greatest basketball players ever produced from Washington, D.C., Mr. Dave Bing.
As a teenager growing up in metropolitan Washington, D.C., I'd heard about this guy by the name of Earl Lloyd, who was from the area, and that he was the first African American to play in the NBA. And I kind of followed his career, and when I graduated from high school and went to college, of all places, I chose Syracuse University. And Earl had played on a championship team, the Syracuse Nationals. We had a chance to meet, and little did I know that that was the beginning of a lifelong relationship. Earl scouted me from college and got the Pistons to select me as the number 2 overall draft choice in 1966, and basically made the Pistons aware that they didn't lose out on the coin flip, that they in fact got the best player. So he was a guy that was always in my corner. And I wound up playing for Earl as he became the coach of the Detroit Pistons. And as coach, he was very supportive of me and made sure that people around the league knew what kind of player I was. And our relationship just continued to grow. Upon my retirement, I started a business in Detroit. Grew the business, and at a point, I couldn't do all the things I needed to do, especially in the community. And Earl decided to come on with me as my community relations board member. When it was time to try to get Earl into the Hall of Fame, I was on the board at the Hall of Fame, and I wanted to make sure that Earl, being the first African American to play in the NBA, should be inducted into the Naismith Hall of Fame. And that did happen. Earl and I continued to be friends, and the relationship that I had with him was one of a mentor, a coach, and a friend. And I don't think anybody who knew Earl could ask for more than that. He was an unbelievable guy and had so many stories that he used to tell us about. What it was like when he first got in the league, how they were treated, places they went, et cetera, et cetera. But the most endearing thing about my relationship with Earl is his deep love for his family, his deep love for the city of Detroit, and he was a role model for all of us. So I'm glad that Parker Gray and Alexandria has taken the time to honor somebody who is surely worthy of the honor. Earl Lloyd is one of a kind, and I was blessed to have had him in my life for such a long period. So rest in peace, my brother, and more power to you and your family, and the people here in this area are always proud of who you were, what you did, and thank you so very much for being my friend.
Earl Lloyd was a citizen of the world, but he never forgot his Alexandria roots and those who put their fingerprints on his life. He broke barriers and helped to open doors so that hundreds of young people could improve their lives through education and sports. I was one of those who greatly benefited from Earl's kindness, generosity, and love. Today, we honor him and welcome him back home to the site which helped to nurture his greatness. This statue represents one of Alexandria's finest, and his story will be told for generations to come. Let's all listen now to Earl's own words of gratitude, hope, and optimism from his 2003 Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame induction speech.
Guy Jones, where are you? Is he here? There he is right there. It's a family member. I played 3 sports in high school. Honestly, I played 2. I played baseball and basketball, and I was on the football team. But every day I left that house to go play someplace other than Alexandria, my mother always said one thing to me. I mean, every time I left, she said to me, do not embarrass this family. And she was not talking about winning or losing. I mean, she didn't want me going out there acting like a damn fool somewhere. I mean, she didn't want anybody to think, in my day, they called it home training. I mean, you know, and if I go out and exhibit, I don't have home training, that's a poor reflection on them. No, they didn't play that. So what I'd like to do collectively, all the people who have touched me, and there's a lot of handprints on me. You don't come from Alexandria, Virginia to Springfield, Massachusetts without some hands on you. You really don't. So collectively, I want to thank everyone who helped me along that journey. And what you really did, you took a question mark in Alexandria and made it an exclamation mark in Springfield. Thank you and God bless you.
That's a terrific statue.
And now, to unveil the Earl F. Lloyd statue, are members of the Lloyd family, Karen and Cornelius. On behalf of the City of Alexandria, the Alexandria African American Hall of Fame, and our founder, Mr. Robert Dawkins, we would like to congratulate and honor and thank the Lloyd family and Ms. Charlita Lloyd for this generous donation and historic donation of the Earl F. Lloyd statue. We'd also like to thank each and every one of you for tuning in on this virtual broadcast today. I'd also like to thank my co-host, Mr. Jimmy Lewis, and to everyone who had something to do with this historic day coming about. On behalf of the Alexandria African American Hall of Fame, again, we would like to ask you to visit our website, aaahof.org, to not only see information about Earl Lloyd, but to see information about all Black Alexandrians in this city. Once again, thank you, take care, stay safe, God bless.